I'm Nicola Bailey Blackstock. Let's begin today's English lesson. All right, so today we're looking at writing notices. All right, so again, as I've been saying all through the lessons that we have done, you might ask or may ask, why is it that we're learning to write notices? And I'm going to tell you again, because on paper 2, right, section B, you don't know what is going to come. So we are preparing you for everything, right? So whatever question you get, you will be able to answer it very well. All right, so what is writing notices? Why do we need to write notices? And what is the importance of writing notices? But you know, before we actually get into the lesson, we always go through the objectives, right? What it is that you're supposed to learn by the end of the lesson. All right, so our lesson objectives for today are: 1, state the definition of a notice. 2, explain the purpose of a notice. 3, outline the format of a notice. 4, list the features of a notice. And 5, express understanding of the concept by creating a notice. All right, so what is a notice? A notice is a very short piece of writing which is usually formal in style. It is widely used by individuals and organizations to announce events and celebrations, births and deaths, occasions like inaugurations or sales, to issue public instructions, to make appeals, and to extend invitations. Most notices are meant to be pinned up or pasted on special boards meant for the purpose. All right, so writing a notice. Now we understand, or we see what is a notice, right? Now think about it. Where have you ever seen information posted around the place, right? Think about it. Now I can think of several places where I have seen notices. I've seen them on, Jamaica is famous for this, on light posts, right? The ones that are made of wood, right? And even the ones that are concrete, they paste them up on it as well, right? I see them on the sides of buildings, right? And I've seen them at designated places where you actually have a notice board and you have several notices pasted there or posted there, right? Now, you might ask, why do people paste notices around the place, or what is the importance of notices, right? But these things, they serve their purpose, right? Now, you can write a notice, as it says here, for any particular reason, right? To announce a birth, right? A death, right? An inauguration, right? Like the inauguration of the President of the United States, right? Notices were placed on several platforms, right? Informing persons of when the inauguration would have taken place, the time, and so on, right? For sales, right? A public auction, right? How many of you have ever gone through the newspaper and seen notices in the paper, right? So if you look through, right, you can see notices, right? So they serve their purpose. Notices usually from government departments also appear in the newspapers, right? So the notices that we usually see in the newspapers, right, they are usually, you have persons who place personal notices in the newspapers, and you also have government agencies and private agencies that post notices in the newspapers, right? So it's not only limited to government agencies, right, or departments. Your notice should give complete information and must be written in a clear and lucid style and easy to understand language. All right. Now, what we need to understand is that if we think about it, right, think of the notices that we have seen posted around our area, right, or general vicinity, or places that we frequent, right? What are some of the features or the things that we notice about the notice, right? Think about it, right? Here it says that it must be written in a clear and lucid style, and you must use easy to understand language. Now, for me, when I see these notices posted around the place, what I notice is that it is very few words, right? There are very few words that is on that one notice, right? Why do you think this is so? Why do you think that the words on the notice, the words are so limited? Why? Think about it. I'm going to ask you to think about it. Why do you think the words on the notice are so limited? Why is it that they use so few words on the notice? Think about it. So again, why do you think persons use so few words on the notice, right? Think about it, write it down, and then we're going to find out if you are correct. All right, so we're coming on to the purpose of the notice. So remember, when I just began, I asked you, maybe wondering why is it that you're learning to write the notice, and I already explained to you because it is for exam purpose, right? Now, what is the purpose of a notice? Now, notices are effective means of disseminating, big word, disseminating information related to different issues or occasions. They reach to a large number of persons in a short time. Hence, a notice is written in simple and formal language. So you have your answer. And the question that I asked earlier, why is it that so few words are used on the notice? And our answer is here, right? It is, we use so few words on the notice because we want to catch the reader's attention and we want the information to stick, right? So remember, the fewer the words, the easier it is for the persons to remember, right? So if you think about it, think about the notices that you have seen before. Do the notices have a lot of words? No, they don't, right? And this is done on purpose because the notices are supposed to catch the reader's attention, and it is supposed to allow the person who is reading it to remember what is on the notice, right? So here it says, notices are effective means of disseminating information related to different issues or occasions. And we already mentioned the occasions that a notice could be used for, right? Death, birth, eviction notice, right? If a landlord wants somebody to vacate their premises, right? So they are used for different issues or occasions, right? And they are meant to reach a large number of persons, right? So think about the notices that you have seen before, right? Have you ever been traveling, say you're traveling out of town? Say, for example, you're, before the highway came into being to link you to like Ocho Rios and so on, and you had to drive Flatbridge and so on, right? Have you ever like passed like the field that has oranges, right? What do you notice that you see on the fence? Think about it. What is on the fence? It is a notice, right? Warning persons not to trespass. That is a notice. Now, what do you notice about the words that they use on these notices, right? To warn persons to not to trespass on their property. What do you notice about these words, right? So we're going to, as we go along, we're going to learn why is it that we have some words that are bigger than some, right? And why is it that some words are in bold and so on, right? They're there for a purpose. It is done like that for a purpose. Now think about it. Think about all the notices that you have seen, whether in the newspaper, on private property, public property, right? Anything like that. Think about it. Think about the words that you see on the notice. What are the words that you see on the notice? Why do you think the words are there, right? So we're going to be learning all of that, right, by the end of the lesson. All right, function of a notice. 1, prohibition, and as I just mentioned, the notice that you would see on the fence of somebody's property, right? Prohibition, right? Notifies people to not do something. Caution or warning. Warns people to be careful in handling something. Now, where have we seen warning notices? Can you think of any situation where you have seen warning notices? I can think of one. When I'm walking like through a mall or something, you have the yellow thing that is there to say, okay, then be careful, the floor is wet. That is a notice, right? Because it is giving you a warning, right? So it would be a warning notice, right? So it is informing you or telling you to be careful where you're walking because the person just mopped up the area, right? So it is informing you that it is slippery, right? And so on. So the notices can be used, as I mentioned before, for different issues or occasions. So one is used for prohibition, notifies people to not do something. Caution or warning, right? Warns people to be careful in handling something. Guidance gives information to people to do something appropriately. Have you ever seen that? We have been seeing it frequently since COVID, where they tell you no mask, no entry, right? Sanitize before entering, right? Guidance, right? So those are what we would call guidance notices, right? So you see, we're learning here. Yes. So we see the importance of notices. Very good. Right? So we understand the different types of notices that we have so far. So we have prohibition, caution, guidance. The informational notice now provides information that could be useful to people. What are some informational notices that could be useful to people? Could it be I'm thinking about it. I can't think of one right now. Informational notice. Can't think of one right now, but we think of it as we go along, right? So these are the different functions of a notice. All right, now we're moving on now to how to write an effective notice. Now, if you have not seen a notice before, could you just get up and write a notice? No, you have to know what is a notice and what are some of the things that should be included on a notice. So we have already touched on what is a notice, right? The function of a notice and the purpose of a notice. Now, since we have learned all of those things, we are going to learn now how to write an effective notice. Now, why is it that we need to learn how to write an effective notice? We can't just put something together and just call it a notice, no. As with everything that we have been doing so far, there's usually a format, right? And because we're teaching you we're preparing you for your exams, we're expecting that you would follow the prescribed format, right? So you can't just get up and do whatever it is that you feel like when you're in the exam. You have to follow a particular format because remember that you're being graded, right? So you don't want to lose any marks because you deviated from what you learned, right? Whatever you learned, right? Whatever you were taught, we're expecting that you just follow through, right? Because you want to maximize on your marks, right? So remember, as I keep mentioning to you, we're focusing on section B, right, of your paper 2, which is informative discourse. And what you need to understand is that for section B of your paper, you do not know what it is that they will ask you to do in this section. They might ask you to write anything. This is why we're going through all of the things for under informative discourse. So we have looked at the application letter, the resume, and so on. So we're looking at the notice now because, as I mentioned to you before, you do not know what it is that you may get to write. All right. So an effective notice will usually include the following: name of the organization, institution, or office issuing it, date of issuing the notice, the word notice, a suitable description / eye-catching caption or heading indicating the purpose for which it has been written. Calling a meeting, drawing attention, making an appeal, or informing general public, etc. Details of schedule, date, time, venue, program, duration, etc. in case the notice is about an event. Signature, name, and designation of the person issuing the notice. All right. Now, what we need to understand as well is that different notices have different things that you should include on it. right? So we need to take these things into consideration. Now, not every notice will have all of these things on it, right? But, right, for whatever format it is that you are using, or whatever type of notice that you are using, you should know what it is that you should include on it and what it is that you should not include or place on the notice, right? So one of the things that we need to think about or to remember is that the word notice must be there, right? And it should be in bold and in all caps, right? The person or the institution, right, the institution or office that is issuing the notice should be there, signature, right, date, time, venue, and so on. So these are some of the things that we would include on the notice. All right, types of notices. Have you ever thought about it? As we have been looking at notices, types of notices, right? So we already looked at the purpose of a notice, right? So we looked at prohibition, caution, guidance, informational notice, and so on, right? Types of notices, right? Now, have you ever seen on Instagram or so on where a dog went missing, right? And you see persons pasting things around their area, informing persons to look out for their dog. This is a notice, right? It is a type of notice. So, types of notices. 1, notice for lost and found of article or other valuables. 2, notice issued for informing the masses, general public, for change of name, warning somebody about something, etc. 3, notice informing about tours, fairs, exhibitions, camps to be organized in near future, right? So these are some examples of the different types of notices that we have, right? So we need to take these things into consideration. So we have the purpose of notices, right? And now we have the types of notices. So we need to think about the types of notices and the purpose. So think about it. We have looked at the purpose of a notice, right? And the purpose, do you remember? Right? Prohibition, guidance, warning, caution and warning, and informational notices. And now we have the types of notices, right? So these are some of the types of notices that we have. All right. Now, let us look at some of the notices, right? Any of these are familiar to you, right? Quite a number of them are familiar to me, right? Or all of them at least. Now, this one, St. Mary's Academy, right? It is a notice about a wristwatch, right? That has gone missing, right? Or missing, right? This one, it is a public notice, right? Attention is drawn to a fake circular issued on ACTE letterhead regarding scrapping of 75% of attendance rule and introducing vocational projects. Now, this is a public notice warning about a fake circular, right, going around, right? Now we see several of these, right? I've seen many of these. Think about it if you have ever seen any notices like these, right? The other one, notice: we are not responsible for theft or loss of personal property, right? Now, think about it. How would you categorize these types of notices, right? Which of these notices would be a informational notice? Which one would be a guidance notice? Which one would be prohibition? Think about it. So I want you to categorize these 3 for me and tell me where you would put them. Would it be prohibition, caution and warning, guidance, or informational? So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to try to see if we can distinguish the types of note or the purpose for each notice. Not the type, but the purpose for each notice. Now let me remind you of the different purpose of a notice. So we have the notice that prohibits, right? We have the notice that warns or cautions. We have the notice that guides, and we have the informational notice. All right. Now we have these 3 types of notices here. where would we put them? How would we categorize them? Now this one, public notice, right? If I'm looking at it, I would place it as a informational notice, right? Because I think what this is doing is telling us or informing us about the fact that false information or fake information is being passed around, right? And they're telling us the type of information that is being passed around. So I would think that this would be an informational notice. Now, the notice where it says we are not responsible for theft or loss of personal property. Where would you put this one? Would it be prohibition, caution, guidance? What do you think? Where would you put it? I would think I'm torn between guidance and caution or warning. I'm torn between the two, right? Either guidance or caution and warning. You tell me where you would place, which area you would, or category you would put it in. Tell me about it, all right? This one, where the wristwatch went missing. Where would you put this one? Would you put it at information? I think so. Because it is informing us that the wristwatch has been missing, right? And it is giving us information as to where exactly the watch was missing. And let me see. Yes, it describes the watch. So I would think it would be informational. All right. So we have some examples here, and we would know, based on what we have learned so far, what category we would place each of these notices. All right, so we are going to be looking at the format of a notice. Now, before we get into the format of the notice, one thing that we keep seeing, right, or I keep mentioning, is the fact that it is important when we're writing certain documents that we are concise. And most of the topics that we have looked at so far requires us to be concise. And it is there's a reason for that, right? Now, what we want is for the reader to be able to be drawn to the information, right, that you are writing, and for them to be able to remember what it is that you have written. So that is the reason why we always stress that you are concise, because it does not, all these topics that we have looked at does not require you to go out of the box, right? And do not, for you to write what is not necessary. So that is why we keep on stressing that you need to be concise. Now, remember, as I keep mentioning, that you're writing for exam purposes. So you don't want to be there writing, and you are not getting to the meat of the matter, right? So that is why we keep stressing that you need to be concise. And the different types of documents that we have looked at so far requires that you are concise, to the point, right? So, and the notice is no different, right? So you are expected to be concise, to the point, using simple language, right? Now, why is it that it is important for you to be concise, right, when we are looking at the notice? There is a reason for that. Now, the reason is, as I mentioned before, what you want is to grab the reader's attention, right? Now, as you remember the different notices that we just looked at a while ago, what is the difference among the three notices that we looked at just now, right? Now, one of them, right, stands out in my mind the most. Which of them stood out the most to you, right? One of them stood out the most to me. Let me see if it is the same one that stood out for you. Now, the one that stood out for me was the one warning the persons that they're not responsible for theft and loss of property or whatever it is. That one stood out to me because of how it was written, right? The word notice, big in red, right? From the get-go, my eyes were drawn to it. right? Yes. So it grabbed my attention, right? So it did its job, right? It served its purpose, right? It grabbed my attention. And the words that were there, separated apart from the word notice, they were big and in bold. So I remembered exactly what it is that was on that notice, right? So out of all the three, I remember that one the most because it stood out to me. The colors that were used, right, allow me to be drawn to it and for it to resonate, right? Very good. So we have to bear these things in mind. So the language that we use, right, and the fact that we are concise to the point. Now think about it. The public notice. You see how long it was, right? If you saw that public notice, would you have read it in its entirety? Would you be drawn to it, right? If it doesn't affect you, then maybe you wouldn't be drawn to it, right? Because once you read the first line and you realize, oh, it doesn't apply to me, I don't want to read it anymore. And maybe it is something important, you know. But then because you see the many words that are there, you don't want to read it anymore. But the notice where it was warning you about the fact that it is not responsible for loss or theft of property. That one, you were drawn to that one because, as I mentioned before, the fact that the words were written in bold, right, and the word notice was in red, right. So the format for your notice is very important, right? So remember, what we want is for the person to be able to read it. And remember, the notice is for, usually a large number of people, right? So we want whatever it is that we are writing on the notice for persons to be able to remember what it is that they read. So you don't want to be a situation where, as the person walk off and somebody asks them, what was on the notice? They say, I don't remember, right? You don't want that, right? You want, when you read the notice, you remember. Now, I can remember one time I was going to the country and I saw a notice on a fence. And you know what that notice said? No trespassing. Trespassers will be shot. And I have never forgotten that notice. Now, and I'm saying, wow, that is very, very blatant, right? So if you dare step on that person's property, right, and you don't belong there, they warned you, you will be shot, right? So then and there, we know that it is a warning or caution notice, don't it? Right? Because once you see that notice, no trespassers. Trespassers will be shot, right? Don't you think that notice would be effective? You wouldn't want to step on that person's property because you don't know if they have a gun for true or not, right? So you would not dare venture on that person's property, right? So that one resonated with me because of the words that were used. So you want your notices to be like that, right? To stick in your mind, to stick in your brains, right? So as you walk off or as you drive by, right, you will remember what is on that notice, right? So it is how you write your notice that will make it effective. So let us look at the format of the notice. Since notices are a formal document, it should follow a structure or a format. Now, what we need to remember too is that notices can be formal and informal, right? So they're not just formal, right? I need to clarify that. They are not, you don't have only formal notices. You have notices that are informal as well, right? Keep in mind, there is no one correct, rigid format, right? So we need to bear that in mind, right? There's no one correct, rigid format. Different formats used by different people or organizations can show some variations, but it is ideal to follow a somewhat similar format for ease of understanding and uniformity. Let us look at the most used format of notices, right? So what we need to bear in mind or to consider is that there's no one format, right? There's nothing that says, okay, then this is the format for notice and this is what you have to use. No, right? And remember again, it depends on the issuing organization, right? So if the organization has a particular way that they structure their notices, if you're working within that organization and you're the one responsible for doing these things, then you know that you have a particular format that the company or organization wishes that you follow. Right? So what we do is, and as it says here, it is ideal to follow a somewhat similar format for ease of understanding and uniformity. Name of issuing organization / authority, right at the very top, right? So this is where you would find it, right? The name of the issuing organization or authority, right at the very top. You print the name of the person or company that is issuing the said notice. This will help the reader identify the notice as important or unimportant to him. Didn't I mention that to you? Right? Now, sometimes, as I said, if I see like a public notice, maybe I'm not going to read it because I say, oh, it's not going to apply to me. Right? But in this case, like the whole COVID-19 and so on and all of these different rules that have been implemented, when I do see the public notices now, I tend to read them because I need to be in the know. I need to be kept abreast of what is going on, right? So as of late, I tend to read the public notices. Title, right? When writing notices, we mention a title, notice at the top, right? Now, did you see the word notice in bold in any of the notices that we looked at previously? I did, but out of the 3 notices, only 2 I saw had the word notice in bold, if I am not mistaken. You can check for me to see if all 3 had the word notice there, right? So the title, when writing notices, we mention a title, notice at the top. And what do we notice about the word notice? Yes, play on words there. What do we notice about the word notice? It is in all caps. Yes, right? It is in all caps. So that is very, very important. The fact that the word notice should be in all caps. This helps draw attention to the document. Notices are generally posted at a public place or published in newspapers. It is important that they do not get lost in a sea of information. So a bold title, clearly mentioned, helps draw the attention. So that is the purpose of you writing the word notice in all caps and putting it in bold as well, right? To grab the reader's attention. So then and there, you see the word notice, right? You want to know what is the notice about, right? You would want to read it. Very good, right? So we have to consider these things. Date. After the tile to the left-hand side, we print the date on which the notices have been published. Now, what I want you to do for me is look through the newspaper, and after we have gone through the format, right, I want you to check off all of the different things that you see on the notice, right? Check them off. Do you see the word notice in bold? Is there a date, right? We have to look and tell me all the things. Check off all the things that you see in the notice that you see in the newspaper, right? So after the tile to the left-hand side, we print the date on which the notices have been published. Since this is a formal document, date is an important aspect of it since these documents stay on record. And these are the ones that are formal, right? This is referring to the notices that are formal. Because remember, most of the documents that we have been looking at, the application letter, the resume, right? The letter of request, all of these documents, right? They are formal documents, and persons tend to place them on file, right? So when you have written the notice and you have placed the date there, then the person who would go on file to look, they will say, okay, then the notice was published on this date, right? So it is very important if you are writing formal notices. Heading. Then we move on to an appropriate heading to the notices, right? Or for the notices. This heading should make abundantly clear the purpose of the notices, right? Now, I can remember when I saw one of the notices, the public notice, right? That is the heading, you know, public notice. So then and there, I know that maybe it is coming from a government entity, right? So the title is there, public notice, right? So the heading is very, very important. So here it says, we move on to an appropriate heading for the notices. This heading should make abundantly clear the purpose of the notice, right? So we need to take these things into consideration. Body. After the heading, we write the brief and to the point body of the notice. The main content of the notice features in the body. All right, now if we're writing, say, a notice like the lost and found one where they were mentioning about the wristwatch, now this would have a body because this body would outline like the features of the watch. When was the last time the person remembers having the watch on, and so on. So this type of notice would have a body, right? Because it is outlining different features of the watch and so on to help the readers, you know, to be able to say, okay, then if they find the watch, then they would know that, okay, then these are the features of the watch, and they would be able to match the watch with what was mentioned in the notice. All right, so notices like those would have a body. Writer's name. At the end of the notice, we write the name and designation of the notice writer. The notices have to also be signed by the same person to lend it authority and validity. Now, think about it. Have you ever seen notices like these where, say, I've seen them quite a lot. Say, for example, at a financial institution where they have posted a notice on the door of the bank or so on. They would say, okay, then effective May 25, 2021, we will no longer be accepting checks, right? Signed management. Right? Now, this tells us this is coming from somebody high up in the organization, right? It isn't a teller or anybody like that writing it, right? It is coming from management. So, bigger heads write this down, so you know that it is something that they mean and that they're standing by, right? So, here it says, when you see signed management, it lends authority and validity to the notice, right? So, when you put the signature there or the person who instituted this notice, we know that, okay, then this is something important and these persons mean business. So as of May 25, 2021, we will no longer be accepting checks. So we know that, okay, then after May 25, I cannot go in there and say, okay, then can you change this check for me? No, because management sign off on it and say, we're not taking any checks after this date, right? So what it does, as I mentioned before, it lends authority and validity to the notice. All right. Now we're going to be looking at the contents of the notice. Now here it says, notices should cover some important points that are to be communicated to the readers. Let us summarize the 5 points that the content of the notice will cover, the 5 W's. Now, the 5 W's. Where have we seen the 5 W's before? Think about it. What topic did we look at that looked at or mentioned the 5 W's? Think about it. I remember. Do you remember? Now, if you said the newspaper report, you are correct, right? So we saw the 5 W's in the newspaper report, right? So we are using them in the notice. You see how things are similar? Right? And if you had remembered your transfer learning, yes, it means that you learned very good. Right? Now, the 5 W's. Write down the 5 W's. Write down what they are. What are the 5 W's? Write them down for me. All right, so the first one, what? What is the notice about? The notice should be clear about what is going to happen, event, or what has already happened, occasion. This is the crux of the message and should be written clearly. There should not be any ambiguity. Now, what does the word ambiguity mean? Now, it means that whatever you write, it should be clear, right? The person should not be there guessing, right? So there should be no ambiguity, no reason for the person to be unclear of what it is that is being expressed, right? Where? If the notice is about an event, then the location of such an event must be written clearly. The venue or the location are important details, so make sure to include this in the notice. When? This is the time and the date of the event or meeting. If possible, the duration of the event should also be mentioned so people can schedule their time accordingly, right? So when you have the date there and the time, right, persons can know whether or not they'll be able to, say, attend the function or not, right? Or they can make do some scheduling, to ensure that, okay, then yes, they can make the event or whatever. Who? This will be who the notice is addressed to. Who all are supposed to adhere to the notice should be clearly mentioned to avoid confusion. So let me read it again. All the persons who are supposed to adhere to the notice should be clearly mentioned to avoid confusion. Whom? And final detail should be whom to contact or get in touch with. This mentions who the appropriate authority is to contact, right? So you want to know, okay, then, who it is that I'm supposed to get in contact with as it relates to this issue or this event, right? All right. Now, here we have an example of a notice, right? So we looked at some notices already, right? But we're looking at this one. Now, if you, right, were asked to write a notice, right? Say, for example, about, say, the swearing in of the Prime Minister of Jamaica, right? What would you include in the body of the notice? What would you put here, right? See, and here it outlines the date, right, and so on, right? Signature, name, designation, all of these things. Now think about it. What would you put in the body? Because this notice requires that you include a body. So say, for example, it is about the inauguration or the swearing in of the Prime Minister, right? What are some of the details that you would include in the notice, right? Say I would maybe mention the fact that the particular location of the swearing in, right? King's House, very good, and so on. The dignitaries should be seated at a particular time, or the guests should be seated at a particular time. All of these things, right, to let persons be in the know, right, as to what is going to happen as it relates to this particular swearing in. All right, so let us consider these things. How to write the notice. In passive voice, presented within a box, word limit, 40 to 50, only words in body counted, right? So the date, the signature, and so on, and the word notice would not be counted. Only the information in the body of the notice would be counted. Information given must be clear, should not cause any misunderstanding or confusion. Catchy, appealing, right? Because it should attract attention at once. Bold letters, catchy slogans, striking words or phrases. No personal pronouns, should be written in third person. So no personal pronoun would mean I or me. Do not use personal pronouns when you're writing your notices. Short but grammatically accurate sentences. So these are things that we need to consider when we are writing or structuring our notice. All right, look at this one. Right, look at it and we see, some of the things that we would include in the body of a notice that is written like this, right? wallet found. It is to inform all ABC residents that a leather wallet was found lying in our park. It has few papers and cash in it. It does not have any IDs or contact details of the owner. So the owner of the wallet can contact me on this number along with an identity of proof, right? So, you know, these are some of the things that you would include in the body of the notice. All right, now we're going to be looking at different types of notices, right? So we looked at quite a few already, and we're going to be looking at some more. Have you ever seen a notice like this one? Notice of pest control treatment. I've seen it, like a big entity where they're doing renovations. Right. This one, violation notice. Have you ever seen this one? Eviction notice. Have you ever seen this one? Right? Have you ever seen this one? All right, so we have learned all about notices. Now, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be writing your own notice. Now, here it says the reading club at your school is organizing a spelling bee competition. As the president of the club, write a notice in not more than 50 words informing the students about the spelling bee competition. So that is your homework, right? And that's all for today, class. I'll see you then. Take care.